I'm high on a mushroom. No, actually, I'm not high on a mushroom right now, but the girl in this picture that I'm looking at is high on a mushroom. Hey guys, welcome to Phlearn, the internet's only daily Photoshop and photography TV show. I haven't said that in a long time. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on Twitter at AKNacer. We got some very exciting stuff. 6:45. I'm recording this late because I've spent like literally all day getting ready and running around town and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Amelia is moving here today. It's very, very exciting, meaning big changes for you. Basically, Amelia's job is the content coordinator, and she's going to be making sure that a lot more photo shoots and content in the DVD series that we're planning, that's going to get pushed into production mode. All kinds of really big things are going to be happening, so I'm very excited about it. It's going to be awesome. Big shout out to the winners of last week's contest. First, we have Ian. You decided that you were going to build a bar named Resolutions and have workout equipment in it for the first 2 weeks of the year, and then have alcohol in it for the rest. I thought that was hilarious. So you win a Phlearn Pro. Tia's winning because she took action on her resolution already. She's taken her portfolio, put it on a CD, and gone out to other photographers in the area to work with them. This is so awesome, Tia, and I can't wait to hear how it's actually going, because you posted it last week, and then now I want the update, so you better leave a comment. You want a Phlearn Pro. Elaine's going through, I think, what a lot of us go through. She's going through some big life changes and just trying to figure out who she is, but along the way, she's setting some really good goals for photography. And the big thing that I loved about what Elaine said is just love what you do, and everything else will follow, which I totally agree. I mean, I love what I do. I teach photography on the internet. I've got the coolest job in the world. Yeah, you can battle me. What? You don't want none of that. So apparently Reem wants to find Adam Levine and make out with him. Right on. You get a Phlearn Pro. And the last winner is Jason because he's made some awesome slides. He's very direct in his approach of what his resolutions and goals are, and I have full confidence that he's going to follow through and make those things happen because he knows exactly what they are and he laid them out. We got such a cool episode today. This is actually sponsored in part by, no, this is sent over by someone in the family, Andy, and I talked to you on the phone earlier. You're a cool guy, and you're working on this composite and having a little bit of issues like with the color and the light and things like that. And this is a perfect opportunity to talk about something that we've never talked about on Phlearn up until now, and something that I think is going to make a big difference in when you guys are compositing. And what that is reciprocal light reflections. That's just a big fancy word that I made up. But here, check this out. We got a bird. Basically, whenever I think about editing anything in Photoshop and doing a composite, a big thing that I left out for many, many years, and something that I've just started like kind of really wrapping my head around, is the fact that every object reflects light and color back onto another object. So if you think of every object like, you know, this bird, think of this as though it were chrome. You know, it would reflect everything that's around it. And then if my skin were chrome, I would be reflecting the bird too, right? Well, that's basically how everything works. It's just some things are a little bit less reflective. And light bounces around. So if light comes here and hits this bird, some of that light is going to come and hit my face. So the bird being this color, the light is going to hit this. It's going to pull some of the color off of it and reflect back off of that and then hit my face. And this is going to color my face. Now, I know that sounds weird, but we've got a little experiment for you. I think you guys are going to be able to see this. The bottom of my hand, what you guys are looking for is on the bottom of my hand, it's actually going to get lighter as this gets closer. So let's watch and see what happens. Do you guys see that? All right, I'll do it faster so you can see. What's basically happening is they're trading light. They're like bouncing back and forth a million times right back and forth on each other. And the bird is getting a little bit of the color from my skin and a little bit of the luminosity and vice versa. So whenever you're trying to have something meet in Photoshop, that's why the shadows are the hardest. Shadows are the hardest thing you're going to do when you're compositing, because when you have something meet, it works in a lot of different ways with light. But what actually happens is right here at this level, you get a little bit of bounce. So you're going to have a very like thin line of shadow, but that's just where these two objects meet. And right above that and below that are going to be where the objects are kind of bouncing back and forth and sharing their colors. Now, I know this is pretty complex, but basically, if you've got my hand and you want to make it look like it's actually sitting on something in Photoshop, you need a thin shadow line, basically where they meet, and then my hand needs to have a little bit of white, just a very, very small amount on it, because it's going to gain that color from the bird, and then the bird needs a little bit of my skin color. Now, that's really cool. It's really cool, and I'll show you guys in practice, and we got a contest this week too. But the other thing that we need to keep in mind is where the shadow is, the shadow. Never start painting a shadow with black, guys. And I actually have showed you guys to paint shadows with black. That was my fault. Okay, don't do that anymore. Since then, I've read a few more books on colors, and I've realized that was wrong. So don't do that. Don't paint shadows with black, because everything has a little bit of color. And actually, the thinnest shadow line, like where two objects meet, the line where they meet, that's actually the most saturated point of any shadow as well. So I'm going to show you guys how this works in Photoshop, and you're going to see what a big difference just that reciprocal trade of information can make. The challenge is I want you guys to take these raw files and put them together your best possible way. Now, I know you guys aren't going to be always sitting on top of mushrooms. That's not the point. This is just a really good exercise in making shadows and light match each other. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Okay, we have our image here, and there are a bunch of things that need to happen to this before we really get started. What I've done, just to make her look a little bit more like she's seated on this little mushroom, basically I just made a selection around here, just like that. And then with my brush tool, I've just grabbed some of these colors and painted around. It's nothing, nothing too fancy. I can just show you guys real quick again how we did this here. And this is going to make her look like she's kind of seated on the mushroom. There we go. So we'll just grab our brush tool, and I'm using my flow at an opacity of, let's switch that back down to 10% or so. Now, if that little line is in the way, the dotted line, you can hit Command H, and that'll kind of go away. So I've drawn a little bit. See, I've got my own highlight here. I grabbed some highlight color and just kind of did my own little highlight on the bit of mushroom, because it would kind of curve around, right? And then here for the shadow colors, you can draw a color like that and pick up some shadow colors. There we go. So this is really the hardest thing to do, is the interaction between two objects and the shadows and the light and kind of how they all play together. But that's what today's all about. Let's give this a slight blur so you can just see it'll match the resolution of the image just a little bit better. Okay, cool. Now, some of this work I've gone ahead and done ahead of time, just because I had to, basically. There's too much to cover. But what we're going to do, our image looks pretty good to start off with, but we need to fix the exposure. It's just a bit too dark right now. So I've got an exposure adjustment layer on there, and you can see I just brought the exposure up and just changed these couple things. And this is mostly to taste. You can kind of play around with these and see when they look at. I know that's it's a very hard, it's hard to know exactly where to put these things, but the great thing about adjustment layers is that you can change them a little bit more. Later on, you can keep changing these things. There are some techniques on figuring out exactly how light or how dark they need to be, but we've covered those in other Phlearn episodes, and they take an hour and a half to understand, so pretty in depth. Next, I just stuck a color balance layer on there so we can get a little bit more color to look right, and this is where what we're talking about today actually starts to come into play. So layers like this, basically what I just did is I grabbed a brush tool. This is a normal layer, and I grabbed the colors and the light that were on this mushroom here. So by grabbing these colors, sampling them with the sample color sampler, and just painting right over on top of her skin, what this is doing is it's actually picking up some of the color and some of the light levels, and it's transferring it over top onto her skin. Now, the hardest thing to do when doing this is getting your variability right. In other words, a shadow is not going to be constant everywhere. So let's say, if we had two rocks and they were, the shadow would be perfect, right? But as things separate and, get closer and smushed in, a shadow gets a little thinner where things get smushed in more, thicker where they're kind of separated out just a little bit more. So shadows kind of move in and out, and they get thicker and thinner as you you know, as you interact with an object. So for instance, right here, that would be like a point in which, you know, she would really be touching the mushroom or whatever, right? Like that right there would kind of be squished. So that shadow should be thin. But that area would be like a little bit looser but she's basically not touching it as closely. So that's where the shadow would go in and kind of out again. Now, that's decent as far as our light levels go, but the color is still not right. So what I've done on top of that, and this is like a pretty bold example here, we've got a hue saturation layer, and I've clicked this colorize button. Basically, I'm just gonna, well, we could just reset this so I can show you guys what's going on. We've got the colorize button, and this is just gonna make everything the same color. And you can bring up your saturation when you do this, and that's just gonna make, it's gonna basically, you know, color whatever you're painting on. And there we go. Let's just bring up the saturation a little bit more. This is a great way to actually draw color from whatever you're going to be compositing on. So you can see there, before it was a bit desaturated and it just didn't really look real. Like it doesn't look like it was really reflecting the colors. And I'm mostly focusing on this leg today because it's, you know, this sort of thing, it's tough and it takes a lot of time, especially to get, you know, really, really right. So I can't spend like 2 hours on it. That'd be a Phlearn Pro. And I've done this sort of thing in Phlearn Pros too. So that's getting our color right. Now earlier we talked about the shadow and how the little thin sliver is always going to be the most saturated area of a shadow. So the next thing we've done is I've taken this hue saturation and I've just bumped the saturation all the way up. There we go. And now what I'm going to do, let's just start off from scratch. I'm going to start off with a black layer mask, and I'm just going to paint white on my layer mask. And I'm going to focus right in on that crease, basically like right where those two areas meet. And by upping the saturation there, it's going to make it read like a more real shadow. All right, so we can see there before and after. You just don't want shadows to kind of go to gray. Not really. I mean, shadows will be a little bit less saturated than your highlights, but you don't want them to be gray. That won't look right. Okay, so we've got the shadows and everything looking decent on the girl. One thing we don't have is the shadows on the mushroom. And for that, we basically have the same idea. Now, this guy here, basically, I just took a, well, I can remake that one. No big deal. I just want to make sure we're focusing on the right thing. But I grabbed my lasso tool, and this is under the girl. Grab the lasso tool and basically just made a shape like this that's going to kind of mimic what her foot would be like if it was kind of lifting off of this. Now we're going to grab a color that's here in the mushroom because this is supposed to be shadow, right? And I'm going to fill that with one color, and then I'm going to hit Command J, and then we're going to just duplicate it. So every time you make shadows in Photoshop, really you want to do they have a lot of depth. And if you can do a shadow in a few different layers, chances are it's going to look better. So this shadow, I just put a blur on, and I'm going to put this onto a multiply blend mode. And let's just lower the opacity a little bit there. All right, cool. Now this other one, I'm going to do this as well, but this one, let's put this on a multiply as well. This one I'm not going to have be as blurred. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to just thin it up a little bit. There we go. Because this will be like what's the core of the shadow. I know, so complicated, right? But this one's not going to get as much of a blur. All right, so this is going to be more the core of the shadow. Now, we'll put a layer mask on that. Alter option to click on a black layer mask. And now I'm going to paint white and paint back this core just a little bit more. So even just that little bit of depth, see how, like, there's no shadow in that, right? That's pretty flat. And just doing that gives just that much more depth, which is going to make a difference. Now, even with this layer here, you want to get some highlights. Remember, this area curves back around, so you need to take that into account as well. All of these lights kind of like wrapping and bending around and playing back and forth, all this stuff we need to take into account. And that's why shadows are really hard. And compositing is kind of just, it's hard in general. But here where it's wrapping back around, see this? This is a perfect example of what we've been talking about this entire episode, guys. Perfect example. And this is, I haven't photoshopped this. See how it goes from highlight down here into shadow? And then instead of just shadow touching shadow, what happens is you have this little thin layer of highlight. Can you see that? That little thin layer of highlight. And basically what that is it's reflecting back around on the what's on the other side of it, and that's what's creating that little light. So you have the deepest, darkest, most saturated shadow right there. Okay? This right here this is actually the most true color of the mushroom itself. These are reflecting the sky. That blue is from reflecting the sky. But this little highlight there, that's what's so important. So when we create a shadow like this, you have to be sure that you include that sort of thing as well, or it won't look real. All right, so let's make sure we just layer mask that away. And I'm going to do the same thing because this area is reflecting the ground. We're just going to layer mask this away. All right. Very nice. So there's before and the after with the layer mask. Probably paint that in a little bit more. So adding that variability with your shadows is just going to make them read a lot more real. Because that's basically the way light works. It reflects color, it brings color in from other objects. Let's go ahead and continue that with our shadows right there. But you can see what's going on here. I've created these shadows underneath her leg. But can you see how they're the wrong color? They're not the color of this. Those shadows should be this color because they're the shadows that exist on the mushroom, and they need to reflect back and forth on our model as well. So it's not only just light and dark, it's also color. So how do we color those shadows? If you did paint them in black, like I've said to do in the past, but I was wrong. Grab a color here, and it's not a huge deal. You could just change your brush mode to color and paint right there. So we're just going to grab a color that's right here on our mushroom. There we go. And paint to color. All right, and you can see there it just pulls out that gray from it, which is very, very important. All right. I think that looks great, guys. It really does it's starting to look great, and I'm going to keep on playing with this, and I'm going to give you guys the keys to the kingdom. I'm going to give you guys my PSD, but here's the contest. Every single one of you guys should do this. Really, you should. The big reason is I know you're probably not going to be putting people on mushrooms. That's not the point. All of this is just a really, really good exercise. And I'll tell you what, if you can make this girl look like she's actually sitting on that mushroom, like if you can really make that happen, and I believe it and everyone else believes it, you can probably do just about anything you want with compositing, really, because this is a pretty hard thing to do. But I think that little tip in playing back and forth with the lights, let me just show you guys that again so you can see. That tip, playing back and forth with the lights. See, that's what it normally looks like. This is how far I got for like 5 years until I learned about the playing back and forth. The playing back and forth. Most people want to just put it directly into shadow. But when we do this, and we have it reflect back that light again, even this could use a layer mask on it right there, because it's going to reflect more light where it's closer and less where it's a little farther away. So here, see how it's a little farther away from the actual mushroom there? I'm going to put I'm going to put a layer mask and just paint black on there just a little bit. There we go. So it's going to be more visible where it's closer to the actual object and less visible where it's farther away. And that play between the two objects is really what's going to help you guys make these composites real. So I'm going to pick the top 5 people. I want you guys to do this, and I want you to do a bang up job. Don't just use my PSC. I'll know. Trust me. I will know. Do an awesome job with this. It's going to really, really help you out in compositing. The top 5 people, I'm going to give each of you guys 2 Phlearn Pros for free, because I'm just feeling generous and I'm in a good mood, and that's how we're doing things today. So I can't wait to see your guys'. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to spend about 2 hours making this composite beautiful so you guys can see, and then I'm going to give you my PSD as well. Guys, thanks so much for watching Phlearn. I know it's late, but a lot of great things are in store for you. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Not cool, dude. Not cool.